All right, everyone, there's an RCP link in the description. We have two new polls as of 2 days ago, actually, that have been made on the national level. By the way, there's a new South Carolina poll from a couple days before that, Biden way out ahead. It seems like South Carolina is definitely his state, so to speak, which really sucks for Kamala Harris, but he needs to pull ahead in either Iowa or New Hampshire to really sort of clinch it. Otherwise, he could have some problems. Sanders or Warren could really come out ahead, especially if it's Warren in Iowa, because if she pulls off a win there, she could roll into Nevada, grab a second state, and actually keep Biden at 1 along with Bernie Sanders. She would become the front runner. She's within striking distance. But on the national level, it's better for Biden. Right now, his aggregate is around 29. Now, this is, again, on the backs of two new polls, ticking down about a point. That's normal. 28 to like 35 is his rough average, and it keeps gravitating up and down, sort of meandering around over time. It'd be very funny if he slowly slumped over time, but the thing is, I estimate that he has a relatively high floor of somewhere around 25. I think about a quarter of the Democrats have decided that he's their man. The rest is soft support. The thing is that right now Warren also has slumped. In fact, if you look at where it looks like Biden's point or two of support went, ironically enough, since no one else is rising, it looks like Beto O'Rourke. It looks like Beto O'Rourke has managed to distinguish himself just enough so that he's almost at the Buttigieg level. It is theoretically possible that he could rise up above old Pete. And if that were to happen, if he crushes Buttigieg out of the top 5, he'll probably go into a tailspin, drop out fairly quickly. What Beto could end up doing is absorbing enough of his support to ride on 5 or 6 for the rest of the election. There's no reason for him to drop out. Kamala Harris is on her way down to that level anyway. Kamala Harris is the big loser right now and has been for the better part of a month. Now Warren has stabilized. Her new trajectory is downward. Bernie Sanders is stable. There is no anti-Biden at the moment. Nobody has distinguished themselves enough to be a viable challenger. That includes Elizabeth Warren. She was rising there fairly decently. She's now on a downward swing. It's not clear that she's had enough time to amalgamate a hardened core of support. If I look at the two new polls, she's riding at 14 or 15. That's where she has been for a long time. In fact, it's beginning to look like Fox and The Economist overestimated her support by 5 points. If she's only in the mid-teens, that means to leave Sanders as the number 2 man, arguably ahead in New Hampshire. But if Warren can't pull it off, if Warren can't stick it in, like if she has a bad third debate performance, loses out on Iowa, that almost leaves everything wide open for Biden to coast to election as far as becoming the Dem nominee. It should be easy for him. It doesn't even matter at that point if he wins New Hampshire. He knocks out Iowa, rises up, cements a win in South Carolina, goes on to probably win in Nevada at that point, gets 3 of the first 4 states. Going into Super Tuesday, the only other person who even looks electable is Bernie Sanders, of all people. He has significant issues of his own. But to see Beto O'Rourke almost in the position Buttigieg should be in, rising up slowly. In the next round of polling, I wouldn't be surprised to see them tied. I wouldn't be surprised to see Harris below 7. Which means she's no longer particularly viable. She peaked too early, and she skyrocketed too quickly. She's now petering out. In fact, let me check, because her old floor of support was at 7. She's now at 7.4. Basically the same. She's at basically the same level she was after a long period of decline. Her first peak, right after she got in, was 12%. That was back when that puts her in a strong third place showing, not that far behind Sanders at the time. She steadily meandered downwards to about 7 until the first debate did well, spikes to 15, and has now receded back to the same level. She's the Ben Carson of the race. That's exactly what I predicted would happen. Elizabeth Warren, meanwhile, her trajectory long-term after the first debate and even before that has been upward. She starts the race actually in 4th at 8%. Rises up over time. She's got a floor. I'd say that her average is 15. Her floor is probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11s or something, low double digits. That's decent. There's no reason for her to leave the race. But at the same time, she's stopped rising. Some people, and in fact, I expected this not to happen for a while. I expected she would even out. But there is a trajectory. She and Sanders have almost exactly the same long-term trajectory. They have almost the exact same long-term sort of average amount of support. It'll be really funny to see who ends up actually being the number 2 in like Iowa and New Hampshire and some of these early states. If things continue unabated, the same as they are now, Biden will be nominated, although it won't be, he won't clinch it until after Super Tuesday. It won't be like he knocks out the first 4 states and says, look, I'm the only one winning anything here, fucking stand out of the way. After Super Tuesday, half the field will drop out. There'll be a reshuffling of the lower tier that's left, and we'll see if anyone rises up at that point. It could happen. You could see that you've got a belated dark horse. You wait until the first 4 states, maybe people start dropping out then. Biden ends up losing a few Super Tuesday states he's counting on because, some lower tier candidate drops out, endorses Warren. They drop out and endorse Sanders. That's sort of the trifecta of people that at this point look like they're going to actually sort of stick it out to the end. That could happen, and then Biden ends up losing. Like, you end up with a brokered convention, the super delegates go against him or something because of the signs of dementia. It's possible, just not likely. But we have to keep all these things in mind. The other thing is this. Joe Biden was riding at around 30 or 31. Now he's down at 29. Now that's not a huge loss, but he does have a downward trajectory here. Most people in the race do. In fact, the only person with any viability that's kind of rising is O'Rourke. It almost looks like the lowest tier of candidates have gained a little bit of support back simply because all 5 of the people who have been considered viable, sort of top-level candidates, have let him down. If that's true, if you're supporting one of these lower level candidates and you care about electability at all, what that says is you don't think any of the others are electable. You probably think Biden's demented. You probably think Sanders is too far left. Kamala had her field day. She's destroyed her own campaign with her own baggage, basically. Warren is too waspish, or she lies too much. Buttigieg isn't high enough up to be viable. You just don't like him. And so you've got this, 20% of the Democratic Party that hasn't amalgamated behind one of those candidates. That's quite a bit. That's enough so that if the whole lower group of the field dropped out and endorsed one lower level person, like they say, oh, it's Beto 2020, that person would become viable. They'd be in a strong second place, actually, at the moment. It'd be funny to see if Warren continues to fall. Can you imagine that? Because her campaign is definitely corporate, neoliberal, must do well, have strong core of support. If she loses that, it means more to her than if someone like Beto O'Rourke loses a couple points. Or Pete Buttigieg, or someone with a less mainstream neoliberal, like a 90s style Al Gore campaign or something. Something a little bit different, a little bit new and shiny. Kamala Harris had that advantage. The problem is her past is straight neoliberal. The thing is, when you dig into Elizabeth Warren's past, it's the same thing. She just hasn't been scrutinized as much because people didn't want to attack her on, lying about her ethnicity and shit like that as much as they wanted to attack Kamala Harris. Tulsi Gabbard took one for the team and knocked Kamala Harris out. That's basically what happened. Harris did stabilize for a while. It's just that she never rose up, beyond being basically tied. There was a moment in history where literally Warren, Sanders, and Harris were within 0.2 of one another at the same exact moment in the aggregate. Biden, meanwhile, well ahead, and that was during his slump. He was in the mid-20s at the time. That's the lowest he's gone. The lowest point Biden has ever been at is 26%. So when somebody else has a single poll that shows them at that level, then they can say, wow, maybe I'm actually viable. But if Biden continues to be at least 5 and upwards of 10 points ahead of the rest of the field, going into actual voting, and there's no reason to suspect that he won't if everything remains the same, he will become the nominee. The problem is then the Democrats have to reckon with the fact that their nominee has early onset dementia, that the candidate that they've chosen will lose at the debates. They have to be comfortable with this fact if they want to nominate Joe Biden. I personally do not see anyone other than Buttigieg that I think is viable at this point in the race that's capable of taking Trump on. And he's not being taken seriously. He's in a low 5th place position, falling against Beto O'Rourke and arguably Andrew Yang of all people. The fish-looking, ever sweaty dude who can't even explain his own fiscal plan. That's really, really sad for the fucking Democrats. That's about all. Peace out.